I'm going to try something a little bit different for this episode. You can see me, and I can see you. Just kidding. I didn't feel like doing my hair, and it's growing back from being shaved, so I have quite a few awkward stages ahead of me, for which I might adorn a variety of headgear, if I don't feel like doing my hair, because I don't want that to be a barrier for what I'm about to try. I'm going to be reading my journal on camera, as well as on mic like I usually do. I'll be primarily looking at my writing, but the goal is to feel a little bit more connected and add another layer of depth to what my experience is usually like. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know if I'll edit out my mistakes or leave them. Let's figure this out together, and please leave your feedback about if you like it or not. It's 2026, and we're trying new things, and there's no shame allowed. Here we go. Episode Into the Shadows. I have kind of become a little bit obsessed with finding a cure for narcissism, or an inoculator rather. Today, I'm excited to talk about this topic, but I feel myself fighting a spot of shutdown. I've had just enough in me though to keep going, I think. I'm gonna adjust the lighting and see if that helps. Before my lights were on, like that, and then I turned them down, and it did help. I was listening to a webinar this weekend where the host briefly mentioned a fishing analogy, and I felt like this heat and energy surged through my body. My breathing picked up, and I was good and triggered right there in the clearance aisle at Walmart. I thought about someone that I currently am ashamed to admit I feel in my body like I hate. I've been dabbling in shadow work to sort of go through triggers and become a more well-rounded gal. So that was the first place I thought to go. Thais talks about asking yourself 4 basic questions to get to the root of things after you've found out what you are labeling the person or the situation triggering you as. So are they arrogant? There can be multiple words that come to mind, but dealing with one at a time, these are the questions. Where are you like this to yourself? And in the case of arrogance, I think the answer to this question can be like when your conscious and subconscious minds are out of alignment. And maybe your subconscious mind is trying to tell you something, like you're tired and you need to get more sleep, but you tell yourself to shut up because you know better, and you stay up late for another night. Question 2, where do you act like this to others? Question 3, where are you like this to the person who you feel like is arrogant, the person triggering you? Question 4, where might you need to integrate this trait? And in the case of arrogance, someone might be triggering you because you play small and you see them getting ahead and using a trait you were taught was off limits. Bringing it in a healthy way might be through speaking up for yourself or assertiveness. The person in question is someone with whom I've worked on a project with. When I was the project manager, he was the controls lead, which means in the project hierarchy, he was reporting to me. But he's in his 50s and I'm in my 30s. He was previously a business owner and I was a green project manager. I know I did my job well, but he showed me in multiple ways that he did not feel the need to respect me. He was probably the only person with whom I felt there was tension with on the project from almost the start to the very end. I've actually written about him before. He might be the only person I have written about more than once who I did not ever or do not currently love. This is the effect he's had on me. I call him Mark, and I called him Mark in the first episode, and he was the person I spoke for the longest period of time in season 2, episode 4, It's Time to Move. And that episode details the beginning of me seeing his weird behavior. I spent another 8 or so months working with Mark, and it just got weirder and weirder from there. And even as I write this, I'm monitoring myself. I'm catching myself holding my breath a little bit, simultaneously feeling my chest puff out. And when I led our project, Mark was the only person I felt stress if I needed to talk to them. You never knew what unhinged yet subtle behavior he was going to pull. He constantly complained about being busy, but when I, the project manager, offered to get him more resources, he would take offense and get irritated and say he had it. But what was lighting me up in the Walmart at that moment is that the project that I ran, that we were on together, was a development project. And this meant that we made a lot of changes and we made them quickly. The best thing I learned to do was be more flexible and realistic. I would entertain the changes my leadership wanted me to make because they are who I work for. But I would be very clear about what each change of scope was going to affect in other areas of the project. And everyone on the project adapted this and came to me if they felt swamped or if they were hitting a wall. I really liked my project team, but not Mark. He carried himself as if he were the only one on the project who was busy. Another fact about being in development is that you work on something, it gets tested. If it doesn't work the first time, that's normal, and you just go back and adjust. When I communicated changes to Mark about his incomplete code or if a sequence was newly set up, he would say to me, "Let me teach you how to fish." Not the punchline you were hoping for? Well, I have met people like Mark over the course of my life, and the one thing I can say for sure about each of those people is that what makes them particularly nefarious to me is how hard they are to explain. The subtle ways they smile when they say something, the tones of their voice, the words they choose. Imagine complaining to the person who has a team of 20 to 30 people, depending on the time of the project, and that would be fine, of course, except Mark would also act like I had nothing to do. And this might sound like our word of the day, arrogant. But imagine your captain is trying to sail the ship that you're on and keep it on course and navigating around obstacle after obstacle. And the captain asks you, their fishermen, to cast their net in a different place because the current location is not and has not been optimal for catching fish. And then the fisherman, you say to the captain with a smile on your face, knowing full well that that is the captain that you're talking to, "Let me teach you how to fish." I lost count of how many times he'd said this to me throughout my time as project manager. And like I said, I dove into the shadow work to figure out how I could grow as a person and not let something like that bother me. I felt insane. I felt arrogant. I felt like if someone heard me think that I'm the project manager and it's not my job to solve his controls problems, that they would think that about me too, that I was arrogant or crazy. And I spread myself all across that whole project. I wrote reports that walked through some of the technical depths of our engineering. I put together justifications for major design and scope changes that were accepted by the leadership. I turned screwdrivers and I swept. I became an expert. And I helped anyone on my team who asked me for it. And that is not what Mark did. He did not ask me for help. He haughtily made comments and expressions that I can only describe using my memories of Lemony Snicket's Count Olaf. The villain who had this look in his shiny eyes like he was telling a joke. But in situations that a joke shouldn't be in. And like I said, there was a list. It was the thing in the episode I referenced earlier where he had the same smile on his face when he told my coworkers, my team members, people who reported to me, that I was going through a divorce. It's the teach me how to fish thing. I did an episode last year also where you can hear me struggling through a sore throat from a cold that I had. And when I returned to the office recovered, he covered his nose and laughed when he saw me. Once I suggested we sing happy birthday to a coworker while in Mexico, and Mark loudly declared that we shouldn't because I once said that people singing happy birthday makes me uncomfortable. And that one was weird because I know for a fact I did not say that. And for the 1.5 years that he worked for me when we were in the US, he knew that I threw every single person on my team a birthday with cake and song. And people filled out their birthdays and what kind of cake they wanted on a spreadsheet I made, including him. Then shortly before we went to Mexico this year, I asked him to grab my computer mouse from my desk since I was already at a meeting room in a different part of the building I knew he would soon be coming to. He handed me my mouse wrapped in a piece of tissue. But he never showed any aversions to germs or any other inclinations to extra cleanliness before that or after that. He would do push-ups on the lab floor, then move on with his life without any hand washing. And speaking of cleanliness, once in my lab, I heard him complaining about me to a team member about how I don't mop. Mop. I had to take on his controls job and the custodian's job and my own job in his world. And when he saw that I had heard him saying that about me, he accused me of eavesdropping. Like he used those words, that I was eavesdropping. He was talking about me about 5 feet from my desk. And just these little things, when all stacked together, make a very strange and confusing picture. And that was only some of it. That doesn't even include how, in absolutely every conversation, the topic always had to come back to him and something he did, even if it wasn't relevant at all. I watched him hold people hostage in just grand stories about how he traveled, how educated he was, how hardworking he was, and how overall great he was. So what does any of this have to do with where I started? Well, when I started doing the shadow work, like I mentioned, sometimes more than one word comes up. And arrogant came up immediately, so I knew that this was my work to do to answer those 4 questions for myself. But what was really giving me pause was getting stuck on how to describe the feeling he was giving me. And I don't think this was a matter of emotional or literary illiteracy. I'm not claiming to be an expert or a genius in either area, but I'm comfortable in both worlds. And I even tried to humble myself by spending a chunk of time searching the internet for a word to describe the feeling I could not put my finger on. The feeling that made me the most triggered. The description I was searching around of him as a person was someone who seems insecure, likes to push other people's buttons for their own enjoyment. My searches returned instigator, agitator, provocateur, even firebrand. A word I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone use, save maybe my high school English teacher, Mr. Ouimet. Shout out to Mr. Ouimet. But no word I saw could quite capture it. Until I realized that itself was the key. It was the indescribable nature of it all. The way he makes me feel. I wrote several episodes ago about how watching if someone's words and actions line up is a great thing to use when vetting. But a third, equally important part of that equation is how do they make you feel? I ignored my feelings about Mark because he made me feel so dysregulated, and I couldn't really pin him to anything that I could say he's doing wrong on paper. I mentioned also in the previous episode, I didn't want to diagnose the subject of that writing as a narcissist, but as someone instead with deep insecure attachment patterning. I feel less avoidant of calling Mark a narcissist. I gotta be honest. But that's what's so powerful about it. The clinical facts hardly matter in cases like this, and I can use shadow work to make myself inoculated from deep insecure attachment patterning, my own or others, or even a narcissist. The description I would give about how I feel when I interact with him is like he is bending reality in some way and then responding to it as if it's fact. So I don't think the average person would think it was okay to share someone else's news of their divorce to coworkers and smile while doing it. But he carried on the rest of our work relationship acting as though that was normal, Flat out saying I said something I didn't say and then using it as a justification for why we shouldn't do something is not normal. But he did it like it was easy. Talking about someone 5 feet from them, then getting upset with them for hearing you is not normal behavior. But he did it. I hope you guys can't hear my cat snoring. I think the reason this had the ability to trigger me the way that it did this weekend in the Walmart is because I work at a huge company that is somehow also still a small world. And I know there is a good chance lurking around the corner I might have to work with him again soon. So I feel panicked. I can't even tell my supervisor I don't feel comfortable to work with him because his behavior is so hard to describe, is what I was telling myself. And a gift of a person like that is that they have a way of making you look insane if you try to tell someone who doesn't know them about their behavior. So I kept trying to think of ways to stand up for myself while it was happening without absolutely losing my you-know-what on him, because that is what people who bend for reality make you feel like you have to do. And shadow work made me think, that's it. If Mark is unrealistic, I was able to boil it down to that. If he's unrealistic, I am unrealistic to myself when I retaliate to his behavior as if it's worth retaliating to. I am unrealistic if I entertain fiction. The same way I wouldn't take a character in a story or a movie seriously, I will not take him seriously. I am unrealistic to others if I engage with a madman and then expect others to view me as realistic or sane. I am unrealistic and a madwoman if I engage with him and then let him have any of my time or energy. And lastly, where can I integrate a little bit more of this trait? Well, to me, the trait I'm repressing here is being realistic. I will be more realistic by simply addressing the behavior at the time it occurs without matching the level of dysregulation he has the potential to stir up. If he makes a joke about me learning his job, I will get into reality and address his problem in reality. I have a long list myself, Mark, and if we need an extra resource, I can talk to our leadership to get some help. Mark, it's not appropriate to bring up my divorce without my permission. Please excuse me from this dinner, everyone, and then I leave. No more. No more acting like this behavior is normal. I will address it in reality. But first, I will slow down, continue the other work on regulating my nervous system and somatic processing, because it's really hard to do those other steps without knowing how you feel in the first place. These are what I believe to be some of the strongest pillars on making yourself immune to narcissists or people with narcissistic traits. Feel your emotions. Feel them. Thank them for giving you feedback. Stay present and stay in the present. Address the situation in reality. And if you can help it at all, I gotta say this. Avoid being alone with someone like this at all costs. Thanks for listening.